everyone. We're here today for another amazing edition of Ottawa International Book Expo Presents. And we have a fabulous author today, Mr. David Garlick, to talk about his amazing book, Principal Chronicles. Take it away, Santosh.
David Garlick, the author of the Principal Chronicles, was born and raised in Windsor's West End. He went to Prince of Wales Public School and John L. Foster Secondary School, neither of which are there anymore. The universities he went to are still there: the University of Windsor to study history and English, and Queen's University in Kingston to study education. He worked for the Windsor Board of Education, later the Greater Essex County District School Board, for all of his career, except for 1 year at Assumption Secondary School in 1991 to 1992. He spent 14 years as a principal at Western J.L. Forster and Walkerville Secondary Schools. He's proud of the fact that he's the only student from Foster to also have taught there and been both its vice principal and principal. He retired in 2016. Garlick is on the board of directors for Good Fellows of Windsor and has been one of their often frozen newsboys selling newspapers on city streets for several years. He's a past president of the Essex County Historical Society and is a founding member and current vice president of Les Amis Duff Baby, a support group for Windsor's oldest building, the Duff Baby Mansion in Sandwich. While working as a teacher and vice principal at W.D. Lowe in the 1990s, Garlick started recording what he called bare bones incidents, short 2 or 3 sentence reminders of things that had happened to him at school that day. His wife had to listen to him tell the full stories, often many, many times, if he thought they were good. So she was happy that he began writing them down rather than telling her all the time. When COVID hit and the province went into lockdown, Garlick, like most people, found himself getting angry and frustrated far more than usual. He went upstairs to his computer and began to read these bare bones incidents over again. The ones that made him laugh or tear up, instead of just being angry or frustrated, were turned into short stories, almost as a kind of therapy. In a little more than a year, he turned 40 of them into short stories. These stories, most of which are mostly true, or at least could be true, follow Garlick's career from preschool to post-retirement. And in December of 2021, they became the Principal Chronicles. Mama said there'd be days like this. The book is available in Windsor wherever fine books are sold. He loved being able to write that. You can also get copies from him. Thank you so much, Mr. Garlick, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garlick. We're excited to learn about your fabulous book, The Principal Chronicles. So, first of all, tell us what The Principal Chronicles is all about.
Well, as Santosh mentioned in my biography, it's I call it a semi-autobiographical, pseudo-nonfiction memoir kind of thing. The vast majority of it is true, as best as I can remember, but I did intersperse some fictional short stories as well, most from when I was a child. It starts preschool, goes from when I was about 4 years old all the way through until last year when I've been retired for 7 years now. But it follows me from being a student to being a teacher, department head, vice principal, principal, and then a retiree.
Awesome. So it's basically, did you bring it together from sort of a diary and sort of expanded those anecdotal experiences in your life?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. What inspired you to write and publish it? Because you must have had like an exciting life and stuff. And so what inspired you to write and publish it?
Well, as Santosh already mentioned, when COVID began, I'm usually a very upbeat person. I'm usually in a good mood. And when COVID began, I found that wasn't the case anymore. When we went into lockdown, like most people, I think, I was frightened and scared and angry. And there was no one to be angry at. I just found that whenever I opened up my computer to read or pick up a newspaper, it was not what I would call an enjoyable experience, and I found myself getting angry far more often than I was used to. The stories that I found on my computer, though, the reminders of what I'd lived through for 40 years, they did make me laugh. And I realized that if they made me laugh, they might make others laugh as well. And so when I would finish a story, I would send it off to friends, relatives, and ask them what they thought. And always, with no exception, they would write them back to me and say that they did make them laugh, and they made them remember things from their childhoods, from their experiences as students, from their experiences as teachers, that made them laugh as well. And they started sharing those stories back and forth. And I thought that although a person's memoir might not be the most important type of fiction or type of writing, making people laugh during those times, making people laugh was maybe one of the most important things that you could do. And so I decided to publish it, and it's done very well down here in Windsor. And it sold copies around the world as well. And all the feedback that I've gotten has been positive. And the thing that I was looking for, the feedback was that it made them laugh, that it gave them memories of what they'd gone through, and they started telling those stories to their relatives, to their friends, and that's all that I was hoping to get out of the book, and that's what I've been receiving. So I'm very quite proud of it.
Definitely. So it's great that you were able to share sort of those experiences in your life and to inspire others to go beyond their anger and frustration of COVID for levity that would inspire them towards a brighter future and moving ahead with their life and moving away from that sort of anger and frustration of lockdown and not knowing what's going to happen next and otherwise. So it's tremendous and stuff. So I guess you've received, what are some of the other samples of comments that you received from how that your book has impacted them from sort of moving out of that anger mode?
Well, it wasn't just that. Now that, in some senses, COVID seems to be almost over, people still find it very funny, and people still laugh at the stories. When I do readings, audiences laugh when I expect them to. Sometimes they laugh when I didn't expect them to. I gave a reading last week to a group of English as a second language students. So they'd only been in Canada for maybe a year, and their language skills still aren't the best yet. But when I read them one of the stories about a student, also an English as a second language student, and when I read that story to them, they laughed uproariously. I had to stop and wait for them to calm down, which was wonderful. Wonderful that when that happened. My neighbors next door, I gave them a copy of the book, and they were driving down the 401 as they read the story from my retirement. So they've known me for 25 years. But when they're reading the story from my retirement, with which they're involved, they both laughed so hard on the 401 that they had to pull over to wait until they could calm down to get back onto the road safely. Those kinds of stories made the book. I saw that it wasn't just my sense of humor and what I found funny, it was what many, many other people find funny as well. And I hope that when people see me in Ottawa at the Expo and they pick up the book, I hope they have that experience as well.
Maybe you should have, like, if you don't already have, an audiobook, because you don't want people saying, "Oh, I got in this accident because I was enjoying one of David's stories on the 401."
Or have a cautionary.
You got to pay attention on the 401.
Cautionary experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Distracted driving from David. Yeah.
may cause spontaneous laughter and cause
yeah, it may cause distracted driving. You don't want that.
And
that's a good
Okay.
problem to have.
I'm sorry, I did have another teacher write me to tell me that her husband was reading the book, and he's not a big reader, certainly not a fiction, but he was reading it in bed, and she was trying to sleep, and he had to get up and leave because he was laughing so hard that he was shaking the bed, and she couldn't get to sleep. So that's kind of what I was intending. Like it wasn't writing it was therapy for me. I wasn't writing it for therapy for other people, but that's what it seems to have become. When people read the book, they've told me that it's one of those things where they're sad when they finish. They write me before they're finished, asking me if I've got any more stories like that, if I'll be publishing another book. So that kind of thing makes me very, very proud to have written that book and make it available to people.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Tremendous that you're sort of getting that sort of feedback from people reading your book. What is one of your favorite stories in the book? Was it the story for, like, you must have a variety of favorite stories.
Again, when I was writing it, I thought, well, this one here, this is my favorite story.
Don't reveal any spoilers, though. We want people to buy your book.
But
Okay.
what I've found is that when I wrote the book, there were stories that were my favorites at the time. But then when I do a reading or when people write me and they tell me their experience from having read the story, then for that minute or that 10 minutes, those stories become my favorite stories as well. When my neighbors were laughing so hard they had to pull over, that told me that the book was actually as funny as I thought. And when the ESL class laughed so hard that I had to wait for them to calm down, I realized that the book is larger than just my sense of humor. It strikes other people as funny as well. And when I was asking my first readers for their impressions, they told me, and I'm not making this up, and I didn't ask for this, but they told me that it has a Stuart McLean kind of vibe. And I've always loved Stuart McLean. And then they told me that it reminded them of Garrison Keillor, and it reminded them of Jean Shepherd, and it reminded them of James Thurber. And those kinds of compliments, like they're wonderful to hear, and they were about the different stories that I handed out to them. So they all became my favorite story when they got compared to writers like that. So I was quite impressed by that.
So as an educator, I would have surmised that you would know of a variety of different writers that might have influenced your style. Are those some of the writers that you just mentioned that consciously or subconsciously mention your style, or are there writers particularly that were consciously inspiring when you were bringing together the Principal Chronicles?
When I first started putting them down into short story form, I reread some of my collection of James Thurber. I reread some of my collection of Stuart McLean. Stuart McLean, if you don't know who Stuart McLean is, he was a remarkable storyteller. He created the David and Morley stories that he read on the CBC for decades, and they were phenomenal, and they are phenomenal still. If you get a chance to pick up anything by Stuart McLean, he's one of Canada's best. And I was also compared to Garrison Keillor, who I've always thought of as America's Stuart McLean. So they're writers that I looked to when I wrote. I don't know if my style is mostly just very clear, and I try and write the way that I speak. And I've had some people tell me that when they read my book, they hear my voice, which is a very telling compliment. I'm quite pleased with that as well.
Well, definitely. When you said that, you're writing as if you're hearing your voice. That's a very good. That's the kind of writing that I actually like, because you're not just, because some writers, they can be very clinical, but when you're writing and hearing the writer's voice, it means that the readers are connecting with you on a spiritual side in terms of how you naturally express yourselves in a way which engages them emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise. So that's like the highest form of writing, if someone can hear your voice when they're reading your book.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Awesome, that's tremendous. So where can people get the book and stuff? Like you mentioned, variety of different stores. Are they independent stores, or where are some of the places you can get the book? I imagine Amazon as well.
Amazon, if you're at the Expo, you'll be able to get it from me, obviously. If you're in the Windsor, Essex area, literally you can get it wherever books are sold. It's in every single store. If you go to Chapters Indigo in Ottawa, you can get it. You can order it online there, but you can get it through Barnes and Noble online. You can get it through Amazon online. It's not available yet in bookstores in Ottawa, except for ordering it from Chapters Indigo, but you have to order it. It's not on their shelves.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely make sure that your book is available in Indigo stores for the Ottawa Book Expo, because we have arrangements to do that. So that's definitely where we're going to make sure, because, people in Ottawa are going to be excited to check out your book, definitely in Indigo stores as well. Physically, it's one thing to get it online. It's the difference when you actually can physically see the book. Oh no, let me just buy the book right now, and so that'd be awesome.
That's what it looks like.
Fantastic. That's a very well laid out book. I would say that cover, because because it almost has that sort of, you're imagining writers like Hemingway and people working late hours, just typing away and stuff like that, and toiling, and how writing was used to be. And in that sort of very sort of toiling away, and their soul and their heart and their spirit all into the book.
Thank you. It wasn't that much work. It just sort of flowed out of my anger.
Sometimes the best work is that way. It just flows. Yeah.
Were you saying, Santosh?
Oh, no. I think a lot of times the best work actually just comes from the flow. It just sort of like, it's meant to happen, and it sort of comes out. And that often becomes the great masterpieces. And I think maybe your book is definitely on the rise like that, like it's on its way.
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right. So you can get it through Indigo, but you have to order it at Indigo. But you implied that you'd be getting copies in, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Just a second. Okay. So we're ready to begin. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Starting. Okay. So you also have a great website, Mr. Garlick. Is it dsgarlic.ca? So what can people find if they visit that particular website?
At the website, I have a blog. And it's an irregular blog. I don't write every month on it, but most months since I've published the book, I publish an entry. I've published another story, or printed another story on my blog. You can also find out what's going on in my career. So where I'll be speaking, if there's an event coming up, I've placed your event on my website.
Oh, okay.
You can also find out where you can buy the book, and you can order it directly through the website, which is kind of nice.
Awesome. So on your website, does it have sort of like a little bit of preview of your book, or does it have just information in terms of what you're doing and those kind of areas and where to buy your book? Does it have are there any stories on your website?
You get the front page of the book, you get the back page of the book, you get cover rather, you get what the book's about. In the blog, you get a short story that's not in the book. You get the titles for some of the stories. You don't get the story itself. You can do that through Amazon, though. If you go to Amazon and order the book on Amazon, it gives you a preview of about 10% of the book. So you can do that too.
Mm-hmm. So based upon the excitement that you receive from and positive comments and feedback about how your style is so eclectically influenced by highly respected Canadian and U.S. and other potential writers, Have
Humorous. Yeah.
people sort of urged you to kind of write another book? Are you thinking about a future book?
Yes, people ask me that before they've even started reading the first. They ask me if there's a second book coming out. And I've got, so if you pick up the Principal Chronicles, there's about 44 short stories in it. But that's distilled from close to 60 stories that I wrote and then had to choose which ones to put in the book. The book is about 60,000 words, so 240 pages. I have about another 20 stories written for the second book. And I was just before this interview began, I was just finishing up another story. So I hope, I was telling Santosh, I'm hoping to have this book finished and ready to be published early in 2024, the second one.
Awesome. Right. And do you have any provisional working titles that to? So
on the cover of the first book is called The Principal Chronicles, and I was an English and history teacher for a long time. The second book's going to be called The Principal Chronicles 2, and I don't know if it's going to be Principal Chronicles 2 TOO or Principal Chronicles 2 TWO yet, or maybe it's going to be both. I'm not sure.
That's what I was going to ask. If it was going to be Principal's Chronicle 2. The word just came out. And awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm sure there's a lot of excitement, with Principal's Chronicles 2, and it'll be sort of similar, or you sort of like similar kind of idea for the book? You kind of other stories? Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. It's fantastic. And in terms of, because, definitely, I'm sure that you could not encapsulate all the different experiences you had just in one book. There'd be many other experiences to share and build on with excited readers out there.
Yep, I was an educator for 34 years. So principal for 14, vice principal for 3. So there are a lot of stories.
Awesome. And as an educator, you were like in history, or what was sort of your collective sort of educator experience? Like what sort of subjects did you teach or were you involved with?
Most of my career, I was a history or English teacher.
Okay, and is there any kind of history, just out of curiosity, that you're most passionate about?
Whatever the school needed me to teach is what I taught.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. You're eclectic.
So, Mr. Garlick, sorry.
No. Yeah.
Mr. Garlick, I was we were talking about the book cover. It's beautifully illustrated, and you said that the rest of your book is also illustrated. So could you talk a little bit more about the illustrations in your book?
Sure. If you're familiar with James Thurber, he illustrated most of his stories as well. He was a cartoonist before he became a writer. And I wanted simple pen and ink drawings, evocative of each story. So I have a wonderfully talented niece who's actually an exploration geologist in South Dakota. She works for a gold mine. And but she's also an incredibly talented artist. So what I did is I would finish a story. I wouldn't send her the story. I would send her a request for a picture. And she didn't actually read any of the stories until the book was published. So I would send, for example, I'd say, I need a picture of a tornado. It's got to be one of those big ones. It's got to be one of those big ones from like The Wizard of Oz. It's got to have a cow stuck in it or a car. And she would draw it up in a couple days and send it off to me. And so of the 40 stories or so, almost all of them have an illustration. And sometimes they're very simple drawings of a school desk or a wedding pillow with 2 rings on it. But they're beautiful illustrations, and they're exactly what I was looking for. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. I'm hoping she'll illustrate my second book for me as well.
That's good. They really add to the stories, huh? As much as you can tell, like a picture is worth 1,000 words, as the old saying goes. So it adds a lot to your humor as well, I'm sure.
Thank you. Yep.
So when you were teaching history, just out of curiosity, because when I went to University of Toronto, one of the great things I loved about going to the history classes is particularly those professors who would talk about history as if they were right in the 1820s or 1880s and you're just picturing everything and stuff. So I guess your history classes were a little bit conversational and intimate experiences, just similar to your book style. I'm just sort of curious about that.
I'm trying to think back. I've been retired for 7 years now, and I was a principal for 14. So you're asking me to go back about 25 years to when I was teaching. But I tried to make most of my classes conversations, where I would simply talk with the students and they would ask me questions and we worked back and forth that way. I tried not to write so much on the board. I tried not to give so many notes. The worry was that history is just memorization of dates and getting them all right. And I never cared about dates at all. In fact, with most classes, I would tell them, here are the 3 dates you need to know. And I would start the first class, write them out. Those are the ones you need to know, and don't worry about it. I'm not going to ask you again. But they were just conversations over a semester. Awesome. And in fact, today, it was interesting. Today, I had a dentist appointment, and my dentist is a former student. And when I sat down in the chair, she said, your ears must have been ringing yesterday because we were talking about high school, some friends of mine and myself, and then we were talking about how, and she studied science and math and then became a dentist. And she said, I told them that all through high school, I hated my English class. But then when I got to grade 13, I took summer school English just to get it over with. And you happened to be my teacher. And she said, and I told my friend that if I'd had teachers like you from grade 9 on, I would have loved English. Wow. So that was a huge compliment. It just happened this morning, too.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a huge compliment when a former student can sort of relay such a story about how you inspire them and how they really liked your style, because, there's not all teachers are equal in terms of having that sort of inspiring students or you going to their classes and feeling intimate with their presentation and the whole educational environment. So that shows that you're taking pride in the environment that you're creating for students to be a positive learning environment and not just a clinical experience of education.
Thank you. No, I was never clinical. And when I was a principal, the teachers would often tell me that they understood that I was a student's principal before I was a teacher's principal. I always did things with them in mind as opposed to anybody else.
Awesome. And Santosh, is this something that you would like to also add as well?
Yeah, I just find your story very inspiring overall. It came from actual anger and frustration, and you were able to convert that into humor. And I find humor is a great healing way to look back at, if you even see a lot of our comedies, our greatest comedies are also there's something sad about them, but there's something funny about them as well. So I find that to have a gift that you can convert that sadness and make it something memorable and funny is very, very, I hope to see more writers like that.
Thank you.
In the future. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
Oh, fantastic. So, Mr. Garlick, is there any sort of perspective on your book or yourself as an author that you haven't had the chance to, that you want to sort of connect with our listeners and viewers out there about your book or yourself as an author in general? That you haven't had a chance to express before in either this interview or...
No, I don't think so. I think that, again, the main purpose of my book was to make people laugh. And I'm very happy that from what I've been told, everyone who's picked the book up has had that experience. So I'm quite pleased about that. That was the purpose behind this, and that there's no serious themes and underlying messages in the book. They're designed to make you laugh. That's what it's about.
Definitely, and that's what we need during this day. And moving away out of the pandemic, we need to laugh. We need to laugh at ourselves, laugh at sort of the terrible experiences that was the source of pain and frustration, and to move that hopefully towards a brighter future based pushed forward by the levity that your book in particular can help us inspire as we move from frustration to hopefully back to an environment of hope where people can come together as a community, love each other in the peace and harmony based upon the shared experiences that come through reading books such as yourselves.
Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you very much, David Garlick, for sharing your book today, The Principles Chronicles. We look forward to you coming to our Ottawa International Book Expo event to sharing your stories and for the tremendous response that we anticipate people will be providing to your book when they check out you as an exhibitor on our event, upcoming event, March 3rd to 5th in the Horticulture Building in beautiful Lansdowne Park. So everybody mark down your calendar and check out David Garlick's amazing book, The Principal Chronicles. So thank you very much today, Mr. Garlick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. It was an honor.
Thank you.